So, given that you put the web into the public domain, are you a socialist?
But seriously, quite a club of accused socialists, wouldn't I?
Why going back all those years, why did you just put it out there in the most liberal and open of licenses?
Because otherwise it would not have worked. I've seen so many systems that people had put together. This is the documentation system to end all documentation systems. And whenever somebody tried to say, you should put all your stuff in this system, and it involved making any constraints at all, and you'll have to upload it onto the mainframe, or you'll have to put it in Word format or HTML or something. Whenever you constrain somebody, then people would break away, and they'd always want to make their own system. So I knew the system had to be really, really flexible. So hypertext links can point anyway, your structure can be anything. But also, I was going to ask everybody to give every page a URL, something weird thing starting http:// and that was a big ask. And you can't ask that and ask also, you pay me a cent for every time.
Right, so I mean, we all, so free has become widely accepted on the web, but it's hard to remember that back in 1990, this was not the dominant model.
Oh, hey, well, it was.
Well, it was certainly for the
on
free
the internet.
stuff.
So,
that's true.
The group that I moved, when I was looking at defining the protocol, I went to the engineering task force, and all the existing protocols, they were free. People hadn't.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true in the internet and Unix culture, so on. But it was certainly a revolution for the commercial software world. So, what do you make of your creation? What has surprised you the most? In where it went versus what you thought you were doing?
I suppose there's the constant, if I really go back to where I thought it was going to be, the original plan was that it should be very creative, read-write space, that basically it should be like a sandbox. And if I'm looking at your photograph album and I'm your friend, then I should be able to just mush it around the same way you can. And the original web browser was an editor. You could make a link just by highlighting a phrase here, pressing a button, highlighting a phrase there, pressing a button, and you got a link. So you could link to things, annotate things. That was the idea. It was really a sort of group collaborative thing, designing together, writing together, and that was missed for a long time while we had the sort of published model. And then now we've got wikis, we've got blogs, and to a certain extent it's come back, but I'm not sure that really with wikis and blogs we've explored anything like the potential of making places where you can do collaborative things.
When you started, you started in the physics community, and it was seen as a means of collaboration for scientists. When did you start to think of it as a means of collaboration for everyone?
Oh, it had to be. Because if the
So you saw it going beyond physics right at the beginning?
Yes, didn't call it worldwide for nothing. So if there was going to be a boundary and you had a sort of a physics-wide web, and then you're going to have a sort of, then you're going to have all the information from the companies that made the equipment that the physicists used, then there'd be this real sort of embarrassing gap where you wouldn't have hypertext. You wouldn't be able to make a link to the piece of equipment you use to take a reading. And so that it would break. So clearly the thing had to have no oil and water boundaries.
Right. So when you think about how it's evolved and how it's continuing to evolve, is there anything that worries you about the future of the web?
Okay. So basically I'm always worried, of course, by anything large coming to control it. Whether some places, sometimes it's a large company, sometimes it's a large government. Whenever there's a sort of a play to get a stranglehold on the net, then that's going to be a bad idea.
So who's trying to make a play to get a stranglehold?
Well, one of the things that we've had a lot of talk about social networking. Okay, it's all the rage and all this discussion about which one do you go to? Do you go to MySpace or Facebook? And this is what is interesting about that is before the web we had already there was internet email, and when you didn't have to. I can get my email at w3.org, and that's okay. I can send email to you whether you've got an email address at the same ISP or you've got one completely different. Email works exactly the same.
Right.
Now,
So
I
Facebook
can't make
is
you
the
my
recreation
friend.
of the old AOL model before the web. in
Absolutely.
some
You log
ways,
on to AOL and you get the world as provided by AOL. Your friends are provided, or whatever it is. So when people log on to Facebook, then they get to define a set of Facebook friends, and then you go to LinkedIn or something, or Flickr or Doppler or whatever it is. You want to do something different with travel or photos, and you naturally would expect to be able to refer to that group.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, one of the conclusions I've drawn from that is that ultimately we'll see interoperable social networks in the same way we saw interoperable email. It used to be the email had those same kind of islands, and before long everybody realized how stupid it was.
Because of the famous network effects, and it was kind of ironic that the earlier speaker said that the interoperability problem is irrelevant. But in fact, if you solve the interoperability problem, then you've got a set of connected social networking systems competing against a lone one, and then the lone one fails because the set of connected ones is always going to be bigger in the end.
Yeah. So what do you think of the term Web 2.0?
Well, I think it's a wonderful term, which has been our guiding light over the last few years, leading us out of the confusion of the Web 1.0. No, but seriously, I think over the years, Tim, we've figured out, what more or less what it means. And I think there was a little confusion initially, but it's been, but so now, I think it's a useful term for things like, particularly sites which are user-generated content, which because they're using user-generated content, allow user participation, and so are much more fun.
Yeah. One of the things that, for me, has always been the heart of Web 2.0 is the idea that network effects lead to these increasing returns in data. And in particular, when you get a big enough database, you start to be able to detect meaning that's hidden in that data. And this, in some ways, is a contrast to some of the visions of the semantic web, which was the idea that we're going to have to add the meaning. Whereas a company like Google found there was meaning already hidden in there, for example, PageRank.
No. Semantic Web's not about about adding meaning. It's about where you've already got meaning in your existing database. I think there's this myth. I think a lot of people misunderstood. Maybe because the myth had been deliberately put around by some folks, but they thought that the semantic web is about taking existing pages out there and trying to figure out what they mean and mark them up. And, if absolutely true, nobody would have the time to mark it up, and you can't figure out what they mean anyway. But no, it's about when you've got if you have a database of who's in which photo, if you've got one of those, it's really interesting to surface that, because it means that you can do a search for all the photos which contain people which have certain properties and stuff. You can do these things which are sort of data-oriented queries, which is sometimes what you want when you don't want to.
And yet, if you look at, for example, a semantic web idea like FOAF, FOAF has turned out to be central, not as a technology or as a markup standard, but to this whole social networking revolution. I mean, what is Facebook but a giant friend graph? And so in some sense, you were exploring the idea space in the abstract, and then it's been explored, in reality by companies that have built on those same ideas.
Right, and what they've done is they've created nets of friends, and they've done it within a closed, walled garden, if you like. But within that walled garden, they've very much reused the data, so that if I make a note that you are in this photo, then the person who took the photo gets to find out that you were in it, and you get to find out that you're in it when you next log on. You find there's a new photo you were in it, as well as me using it, and people can follow that little piece of information from either side. So
it seems to me there's kind of almost a model like we often, when we tag a photo or something, we're training the data set, and you look at face recognition, for example, in iPhoto, you go and tell it, this is this person, or you tag a photo on Flickr or in Picasa, you're adding that meaning, but after a while, the machine learning takes over and it can start to recognize the face. So we're kind of in this interesting transition point where the explicit meaning and the implicit meaning are starting to work hand in hand to take it to the next level.
There's some cases where having machine learning find in the jumble of stuff out there, find meaning is useful and appropriate. But on the other hand, with most of the stuff that we're pushing for the semantic web, for the world of linked data, the data it's not such a big problem because it's already there in something like a spreadsheet.
Right.
Typically, spreadsheets or a database. So, for example, I've been pushing, just 2009, I've decided it was going to be my year for pushing governments to get their data onto the web. And other people, you all put your data on the web too, but there's going to be, but there's a focus on governments because it was timely because the US government was being very positive about putting data out there, and the UK government specifically, that Gordon Brown asked, well, what should the UK be doing? And I said, put your data on the web, and he said, okay. And it's, it's kind of nice when you get this positive response from lots of people at the grassroots on both sides who've always wanted to do this and have been started to put stuff out. So that is exciting, and typically what you get when you actually shake the tree, you say, all right, bring out your data, you get a few databases, you get a lot of spreadsheets, but typically you get these spreadsheets which have got a table in there, and it's got the name and address and telephone number of the person to call if you have any questions, sort of up on column, overlapping with column 8. Right? It's designed, this is a spreadsheet which has been designed as a presentation document. It's designed to be looked at and printed. And still, you can't even, you still have to do stuff with it.
I remember somebody once described XML as a format in which the field delimiter is the field label. In some sense, if you already got a label, what can you do with it? So you started using the term linked data a lot. Can you talk to us about what you mean by that term and why you think it's important?
Well, when we started the Semantic Web, we started with a sort of layer cake of all the technologies we need, and we developed various languages, like an ontology language for describing how the terms interrelate and how different sets of terms connect to the different vocabularies connect to each other, and so on. We need a query language, but in fact, when you really want to just integrate data, what's most important to focus on is just the data, getting data out there. The work you do on the terms is relatively simple and straightforward. And when you do it from the grassroots, you don't start off with shared terms shared by everybody. You just stick your own data out there. If somebody wants to interoperate with it, then they can put in a note.
In the same way the web grew organically.
Yeah, it's very organic. And when you start organically, you start at the data layer. And the data layer we called linked data because the word semantic web was kind of long and complicated. And linked data is what it's about.
Carried a lot of semantic freight.
Yeah, so people use the word semantic.
Yeah.
I mean, people mean lots of different things by the word mean, and they know lots of different semantics of semantics. But linked data is very straightforward, just using URIs for concepts and URIs for things out there, products. With that much simpler idea of just put the data out there using standards, use URIs for things, and make links so that I can find related stuff, it's spreading.
Somebody once said that the 404 was one of the critical inventions on the web. The idea that a link could break and it was okay. Do you still feel that way?
They were right. And actually they were. Because suppose you think about it, you're going to design a web-like system and there's going to be no 404s. Well, you're going down the design path that all the hypertext systems before the web have gone down. And what you do is you make sure that you have a database which has got the beginning and end of each link in it, and so that the link is either there or it's not. And if it's there, then you can follow it from either end. And you never start following a link from this end and find that there's no other end. So you make sure that the whole system is consistent. And people thought it would be horrible to have a system which is inconsistent. Why would you want to follow a link and not end up anywhere? Well, it turns out that to build a completely consistent linked database is fine when you've got a hypertext on a CD-ROM or something. But as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and you get more and more people, making a huge consistent thing will just require everybody to put, they'd all have to put publish their links on a central server.
So in some sense, the idea that links can break is a real key to the scalability of the web.
Yeah, it was a trade-off. It was a design choice. It meant that, now the great thing is, it means I can write a whole bunch of links and have every intention that I will or you will produce material at the other end of it, and I don't have to wait, and we don't have to go through lockstep.
So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and it's reflected in the theme for this event, is the fact that we're moving out of the web era in some ways. The web, is something that has been associated with personal computers connected to the internet. Increasingly, we're moving onto handhelds. The web is one of the applications there. We see, for example, the rise of the iPhone application market, which is back to standalone applications. Certainly, there are internet-connected applications, but do you think the web is going to make the transition to mobile, or does it need to change in order to make that transition?
The web is making the transition to mobile. And I think there's some websites which are they're starting in mobile now, because there are a whole lot more web browsers on phones now than there are on laptops, of course. In some cases, it's tricky, but I think that, it reminds me of the time when the web first started, and a trendy computer was 800 by 600, and a lot of websites would say, please adjust your computer. That's not adjust your screen. Turn your BIOS to run your screen, run your CRT monitor at 800 by 600 pixels, because this website was for best viewing of this website.
Yeah.
And books were written saying that this is what you should do, and 800 by 600 was your best choice. Because people just didn't realize at the time how things would shift. And then the moment screens started to move up to 1,000, all those 800 by 600 sites, looked a bit silly. And if you're still designing those 800 by 600 sites, even if you're designing with Flash, I'm sorry, they're not very cool when you look at them on a huge monitor. So it's not just the move to mobile, which is making us realize that we've got to design independently of the device. It's also the move to huge screens like these things.
So flexibility matters.
Yeah. So there's a mobile web initiative. Look up the guidelines about how to make your website work with.
So all the things that you look out there happening on the web today, what's most interesting to you? The things that have really made you sit up and take notice and say, wow, that's really cool.
Whoa. Well, I've never had any favorites. People have always asked me my favorite website. But when it comes to technology, there's a lot of stuff happening. There's the move to mobile. Interesting things happening in HTML5. If you think that HTML5 is just a new version of the markup language, what's really interesting about it is, in fact, it's a computing platform. It's the web applications. It's the fact that HTML5 is a specification for the environment for scripts. And if you look at the web app specs, there are things like the facilities so that you can know where on the planet you are from geolocation. There are facilities like being able to access the sensors, cameras, and so on coming up. So that is that is a big shift, in fact. So what you'll think of as a web page more and more will turn into a widget. And in fact, maybe a web page, is it a widget or is it an application? Yeah. You said that we're moving from the web to applications. Well, maybe those applications won't be distinguishable from web pages, really, because it'll be the same technology.
Sundar Pichai from Google, who runs the Chrome group, was talking about this idea of, really particularly with netbooks, their vision that HTML5 will drive web apps that really mean that we just don't need any apps outside the browser anymore. So you subscribe to that view?
Well, when I run an app, I like to, when I'm doing something I'm dealing with anything financial, if I'm buying music, if I'm downloading bank statements, then I like to do that with software that I trust that's on my machine. And sometimes I like to use software which has got particular capability of, say, dealing with bank statements. So I want to be able to install stuff. Now, whether in fact I've gone to a website and said I want to trust this. I don't know whether it'll be called trusting it. I think one of the difficult things that we've got to do, in fact, one of the gating factors for this whole world of web apps taking off, is the trust. How do we determine when a piece of software from here is using data from here, here, and here? How do we build that computing system so that, there's a trust model which will make that work out. At the moment, we've got all these cross-site scripting problems. There are a lot of issues with how the trust works. And there's a lot more design which has to be done. If we get a really good solution to that problem, then the web application platform will be amazing, because it'll allow me to go out and pick and choose really nice applications and mix it with data that I've got from all kinds of other applications, and mix it also with all the data which is going to be out there sort of for free about the state of the economy and the state of the country and the state of the football results and so on. So
when you say football, you mean English football, I assume.
I was going to just, to be an international, I was going to leave that unstated. But
so what are you working on at W3C that this group ought to be paying attention to?
I talked about web apps. You should be paying attention to the mobile web initiative. There's things moving forward. I mean, things like CSS and HTML are still advancing. One of the interesting things might be, it'd be kind of nice, and you might want to talk to a browser vendor near you, the remaining one. SVG has been around for a long time. That's and there's a certain amount of pressure for the final browser vendor to end up implementing that. All the others have. That would be kind of neat, and it would make the. It's been implemented for ages. It's nice, powerful user interface technology. Go nicely with HTML5, in fact.
Steve Gilmore, I ran into Steve Gilmore out in the hall, and he was saying, he talked to you a little bit earlier about sort of his imagination of some kind of unholy marriage of Sparkle and PubSub Hubbub. What do you think about that?
Right. Well, so here's one way that you can get this web of data going. That people produce data in all kinds of different forms, and it gets converted one way or another into RDF. Maybe the person publishing it does, maybe somebody else does. Like RPI at the moment, I'm taking a whole bunch of the data.gov stuff and turning it into RDF. So you've got RDF out there, and then people, independent third parties take that and they put it into triple stores. We're seeing some big triple stores. It's neat, the 4 stores now come out as a scalable triple store, and so these things will support Sparkle, the query language, which is a remote query protocol. And now Sparkle basically says find all the things that look like this shape in that mass of linked data and return it as a table. So Sparkle turns a graph of interconnected things into a table. It returns the table, and of course, so you can get the table back in XML, in JSON, as a CSV file, for example, so that then you can put it into all the things you've got at the moment, which you're used to do, which you do things with.
So that's one of the ones that people should be paying a bit more attention to.
So one of the things you can do is look at Sparkle as a converter from the linked data graph into tables, which you know and love. What we were talking about, that whatever break it was that, yes, wouldn't it be nice, something I've always wanted to go do, sort of wrote about this ages ago, is I'd like to be able to do a query to the graph and say, oh, right, thanks for the table. Now tell me if that changes. So if any of those things, now check, go back through the federated system to all the places where that came from, and subscribe to changes on my behalf, and then do the mathematics so that you can figure out when that table would have changed. If somebody dies or somebody moves or whatever, I want to see it, or they write another song and record another song, I want to see it show up in my playlist. So and so that brings up the question of whether will PubSub of data, will data flows, as No Noun Rohit, and hi Rohit, experimented with a while ago. There was an age of PubSub. We have ages of PubSub every now and again. I think maybe we're due for another one.
Okay, good. Let's pay attention to that. It's certainly true. Jeff Jonas likes to say that the current search phenomenon is a little bit like playing Go Fish. You kind of, and he particularly talked about it in national security context. He says, okay, I talked to the CIA, and they say their method is like, do you have a terrorist today? And that's not the right way to do it. You want that persistent query to live out there in the query space and, as you say, return results when something changes. Moving on, different topic. Last year or earlier this year, you started something called the Web Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is that for? Why are you doing it?
Well, the web is a kind of big thing. It's important to some of us. It's a big system. It's got 10 to the 11 web pages. We've been talking about web science because we want people to study it. We've been producing standards for it. We're doing lots of things to promote it. But when you look at what's the goal for the web in general? the goal for the web surely is that it serves humanity. And if you look at that, then you realize, whoa, it's not just producing standards we need to do. Actually, we need to be, and doing science, but also you realize that when you put the words sort of web and humanity in the same sentence, actually, there's only 20 to 25% of humanity that actually uses the web at all. So you think, what about the others? Well, do they not have signal? Well, maybe they have, actually, 80% of people live in a place which has signal of some sort. So maybe they don't have a phone. Maybe they have a phone, but it doesn't have a web browser. Maybe they have a web browser, but it doesn't have the Ethiopian characters they need. So
trying to advance web accessibility around the world.
Trying to wonder also, it's not just getting access. It's making sure that the web is designed so that it is designed appropriately for other cultures as well. It's about looking at, as out there's this very exciting time of there's economic growth, there's growth in sort of healthcare, clean water, there's growth of access to the web, and all these things are happening. Are they orthogonal? Not really. They're very interconnected. So I think it's going out there and looking at what people have been doing, looking at what's happened in the past, and figuring out what is the little thing we can do, the small thing that a foundation can do with a concerted group of volunteers and tweak so that people will get it earlier. So something will happen 15 years before it would have happened otherwise.
That's great. Can you hold on just a moment? If anybody would like to ask questions from the audience, please come up to the mics and you can continue your thought while they're doing that. Sorry. Oh, well, I guess I interrupted you. It looks like we got one here.
Hi, John Dorikas from Kitco Metals. First of all, I'd like to thank you because of your vision. We have a booming business and multiple hundreds of employees are being in business because of this. Carly Fiorina the other day was sitting where you're sitting. She called the World Wide Web the Wild West, and regulation is inevitable. Where do you stand on this, and how do you see this?
Well, there was when the web first started, and people for the first time fired up their computers in their basements and connected their modems and signed on. They were sort of shocked and just got the thrill of surfing from one website to another. I think then there was a feeling that because you went from one country to another with a click, that there were no borders, and I think some people felt that it was as though it had no laws. It was new. It was felt like a pioneer area. Of course, our laws are jurisdictions. When somebody does something, if somebody defrauds you, they're sitting somewhere, they're subject to a jurisdiction, and so things which are criminal, and so in general, the rule of law applies on the web. So I don't know what Carly was thinking of, whether she was thinking of something particular. In general, the web's, to first approximation, my view of the web is that it should be just a flat platform. It should be a platform for you to build on what you want to build on. The web technology itself shouldn't try to tell you what's right and what's wrong. For that, we have, humanity has ways of doing that. We have political systems and legal systems. There are some, it's true that sometimes, you find that the internet culture, for example, tends to promote openness because it's kind of difficult to censor. So there, in some ways, a technology can push you in a particular way, and in a way, the web is, because it crosses boundaries, it brings up the jurisdiction problem.
Yeah. Over here,
but it's not. In general, it isn't the Wild West. Laws apply. There are some issues with imbalances across borders, and so on. And sometimes it's difficult to follow up rapidly with a helicopter across borders, but it's not a lawless place.
Let's go to the next question.
Good evening, sir. So I was thinking, when would one can expect an HTML tag which corresponds to an agent? So I can include an agent in my HTML page so that much of intelligence control is on the web page, but the web does kind of computation for me what is my preference kind of right now, which is on the servers, not on my web page. So can we expect something like that in coming future?
Well, if you think that's important, then go and code it up, my friend. Okay, then bring it along. Do it. Okay. Yeah. Code it up. So make an agent tag write a script which, if included at the top, will in JavaScript implement the agent tag.
Yep.
Okay, test it out. See whether what you think of as an agent actually matches what other people think of as an agent. They may come back and tell you that it should be called something else. But no, if you've got a new technology, get together a group of people who think in the same sort of way, discuss it very openly and early rather than late. Release often your ideas. Don't wait till they're finished, and then let's start a group together to roll it out as a standard if you think it's going to be important.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Next.
Hi, it's Marijn at FactLink. Regarding the wider adoption of the Semantic Web, could you talk a little bit about what events need to happen to promote that somewhat more?
I think that the web of linked data is spreading out, for example, so it's being deployed now with government data. There's been a large amount of it put out with life sciences data. So life sciences data really happened because there was, in life sciences, you've got so much data, and there were these stovepipes of genomics and proteomics and genetics and clinical trial data and so on, which were in independent systems, and that was the real impediment to people discovering drugs. And so there was a critical mass of people within that community who thought that we need to put it all in as linked data. I think that we'll find, hopefully, within what we'll get is these smaller communities. If you're looking at the network law, the great advantage, when you have the network effect, yes, it's great that as you get lots and lots of people in the network, then you get a lot of effect. But the downside is when you have a small number of people, when the chance of meeting somebody else who's got the same sort of thing, then there's less value. So the way to get that to happen is to concentrate the development into a smaller area. So going for things like life sciences, compress the same number of people into a smaller volume, and they will have higher temperature. So concentrating on government data will mean that instead of us just sort of promoting bits of data here, there, and everywhere, if we push the U.S. government, and they're really in a position to be glad to be pushed, and the same with UK government, and then we get two groups of data, which then you can cross-correlate. So you can look at, the schools. You can do that business of comparing schools between the UK and the US, for example, and bike accidents and things. Then you end up producing a community. So what's happening in the UK is there is a government data site, and it's only open to developers, so that they want to sort of, open it up when already people have got some mashups.
But yeah, so I think the real essence here of what you're saying is part of the linked data idea is it's time to do for data what you did for documents when you first launched the World Wide Web.
Absolutely, yeah. And
starting
and the way to get
level, that's where we'll get to that next level of application.
Because connecting them up is where it's exciting, and that's where the extra value is, yes.
All right, well, thank you very, very much, Tim, not just for your time here, but for the gift that you gave us. You really have been a benefactor of humanity.
Hey, it's been fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Take care.